Welcome to another episode of Grammar is Power. In this second of a two-part series, we'll review how to identify sentence types and additional strategies to join and punctuate compound sentences correctly. We'll also review conjunctive adverbs. We're talking about sentence types, how we classify sentences according to the combination of independent and dependent clauses they have. The previous video reviewed simple and compound, so we'll pick it up with complex. A complex sentence has one independent clause and one or more dependent clauses. We first identify the two subject-verb combinations, Mansion burned and Rochester tried. Then we identify what modifiers go with each subject and which modifiers and complements make up the predicate. Finally, we look at how the two clauses are joined, in this case with a subordinated conjunction that makes the first clause an adverb one, a dependent one. Take a moment to identify the subject-verb combinations, the clauses, and the clause types. The sentence has two adverb clauses, one at the beginning and one at the end. The independent clause is in the middle, so this is a complex sentence. As a quick trip to the future explains, there are two other types of dependent clauses. Dependent clauses have subject-verb combinations and depend on the independent clauses. Adverb clauses functions as adverbs, modifying the verbs in the independent clauses. In an earlier video, we reviewed this type of dependent clause. A dependent clause that modifies the noun or pronoun right in front of it is an adjective clause. They usually begin with who, whom, that, or which. They're also called relative clauses. A nominal clause, also called a noun clause, functions as a noun in the independent clause. Here, will I succeed is the predicate nominative, following the be verb was. More on these types of dependent clauses in later videos. Compound, complex sentences combine the requirements for both compound, two or more independent clauses, and complex, one or more dependent clauses. Can you identify all the clauses here? The independent clauses are, James hid in his closet and he ignored his mother. The dependent clauses are, because he wanted to play video games, which interrupts the first independent clause, so it requires commas on both sides and it tells why he hid. And the second one is, when she called, which tells when he ignored her. It follows the independent clause, so no commas. If we look back to the steps we reviewed for how to identify clauses from the adverb clause video, you'll see that we've added one more, identifying sentence types. So now we've reviewed all four sentence types. Here's another way of looking at the same information in shortcut formulas. Time for a concept check. On your notes handout, identify the subjects and verbs, put square brackets around adverb clauses, underline subordinating and coordinating conjunctions, and identify the sentence type. Pause the video until you're finished, then check your answers. The sentence contains two independent clauses. Therefore, the sentence type has to have compound in it. She wanted to call it biscuit and, but her mother wanted to name it allegory. The two independent clauses are joined by the coordinating conjunction but, so we need a comma in front of it to avoid a run-on. The sentence begins with an adverb clause, when the girl saw her new puppy. It tells when she wanted and comes before the independent clause, so we need a comma here. The sentence closes with a dependent clause, because the family traditionally named pets after literary devices. It begins with a subordinating conjunction because and comes after the independent clause, so no comma. So far in this video series, we've reviewed how to join two independent clauses with a comma and a coordinating conjunction, but there are other ways. For example, we can use a semicolon and no conjunction. The semicolon suggests that the two independent clauses are more closely connected than a period indicates. Let's examine this sentence. What are the two independent clauses and how are they joined? The two clauses are, the old woman swallowed a fly and then she swallowed a spider. They're joined incorrectly by and. If we keep the and, we need a comma to avoid a run-on. We can, though, remove the comma and coordinating conjunction and use a semicolon. She swallowed the spider to catch the fly, so the ideas are closely connected. Since sentence variety is a key element of style, let's review a third way to join two independent clauses, with a semicolon and a conjunctive adverb. Not as catchy as the original song lyrics, I know, but the use of a semicolon and conjunctive adverb correctly joins these two independent clauses. Flashback alert. You may recall that conjunctive adverbs join grammatically equal units. That's the conjunctive part. And they express the relationships between or among the elements. That's the adverb part. Take a few moments to read aloud the conjunctive adverbs to help them get into your head. Because conjunctive adverbs convey relationships, it's important to use the correct one. Consequently means as a result of. Subsequently means after. Let's practice. On your notes handout, identify the subjects and verbs, bracket the adverb clauses, underline the conjunctions, correct punctuation errors, and identify the sentence types. Pause the video and then restart it to check your answers. Let's break this sentence down. There are 4 subject-verb combinations, so 4 clauses in the sentence. Because do expect has an implied subject, you, we write it in and identify it in this way. Flashback alert. You as a subject can be implied, especially in commands and requests. The sentence contains 2 adverb clauses, one in the beginning and one in the end. We can identify them by their subordinating conjunction openings. The sentence also contains 2 independent clauses that are joined by the conjunctive adverb however. So, we need a comma after the opening adverbial clause. We also need a semicolon before and a comma after the conjunctive verb however. Lastly, we count the number of independent clauses, 2, which means compound, and dependent clauses, 2, which means complex. So it is a compound, complex sentence. Besides joining 2 independent clauses with a semicolon, conjunctive adverb, and comma, there are other structures we can use to show the relationship between ideas. For instance, we can start with a conjunctive adverb. In this case, the independent clause modifies a verb in a previous sentence. Just as adverbs can interrupt independent clauses, so too can conjunctive adverbs. The key is to punctuate them correctly. Conjunctive adverbs require commas on both sides when they aren't joining independent clauses, unless it doesn't make sense. It's easier to remember commas on both sides and then use your logic to know when to drop one of the commas. Let's see how this works. Here we have an adverbial clause and an independent clause. We want to use a conjunctive adverb to join them, not just a comma. The however links this sentence to the previous one. Since both sides are not independent, the conjunctive adverb needs commas on both sides and not a semicolon in the front. We can move the conjunctive adverb to the front of the sentence and apply the commas on both sides unless it doesn't make sense rule. We don't start sentences with commas, so we only need the comma after the however. Similarly, we don't put a comma right before a period at the end of a sentence, so the however at the end only needs a comma in front of it. Here are the punctuation patterns we've reviewed in this 2-part series on sentence structure. Let's pull it all together. On your notes handout, identify the subjects and verbs, bracket the adverbial clauses, underline the subordinating conjunctions, correct punctuation, and identify the sentence type. Pause the video as you work and then restart it when you're ready to check your answers. Here's what we have. An independent clause in the beginning, followed by an adverb clause that tells under what condition they have no chance. No comma, since the adverb clause follows the independent clause. Then we have a conjunctive adverb joining another independent clause, so we need the semicolon and the comma. 2 independent clauses and 1 dependent clause creates a compound complex sentence. And that concludes this episode of Grammar is Power.